Welcome to the periodic table of history. We're going to talk about Achilles and Goliath, two heroes of history that we don't normally put together. Now, after reading the Iliad again, it was striking how similar the Iliad depiction of Achilles and Hector was to the David and Goliath story. So let's look into this phenomena, review both stories, and look into the legacy. Now, some people think the stories are myths, but the likelihood of the events in the stories are very, very high. And the way to think about this is to look at the tallest basketball player and to some of our tallest people that we have on record even now. Now, this is George Muresan. He is from Romania. We can see him playing basketball, and if you will notice, he is towering above the other basketball players who are towering above the very tall referee who towers above the spectators, the normies. He is 7'7". He's the tallest player in the NBA, and Goliath is taller by 2 feet plus. And then Achilles is probably taller than Goliath. Goliath is probably 9'9" and probably a little bit taller than that. But I'm using a 1.5 foot reference for a cubit. Let's visit some people from history. Here is a Finnish giant, Väinö Mailiainen, and he is 7'4" tall, so a little bit less than our previous basketball player. And when I'm looking at this picture, I'm getting a little bit confused because the small person is a grown man. And I think that Väinö should be shaking the hand of a small child, but then I see that no, that is not a small child, and that messes with my mind just a little bit. And here is a little bit taller person, Franz Winkelmeyer, an Austrian. Now he is 8'6". So this is a whole foot taller than our tallest basketball player. And so what happens if you dress him in Mycenaean armor and put him back 3,200 years, teach him the greatest tactics for killing and warfare? That would be an interesting picture. Would we have giants? I think so. And you have to view these tall people as warriors that would be used to defend a city or used as a deterrent. Like that would be the 3,200 year ago equivalent of our nuke bomb today. Now the tallest person ever that we have a picture of is Robert Wadlow, and he is 8'11" tall. So this is getting close to the dimensions of Goliath, who is at minimum 9'9" tall. So we would have to go a foot taller than Robert Wadlow so we could get to the size of Goliath. And it'd be nice to know the dimensions of the person standing by. You could put a midget beside him, and then there would be some kind of contrast that we would have a hard time comprehending. Say the guy is 6'6", then the difference is less than if the person is like 5'7" or something like that. Anyway, dress Robert Wadlow up in Philistine armor and see what a menace he might look like. So now we go to our table of history. Here's our fourth dimension, because we have 3 dimensions on our map, and then we have our time dimension right here. So this is a cross-section of history itself. And we're going to be looking at Greece, which is here, and we're going to be looking at this vertical line that is Israel, that goes back to Adam and goes all the way down to present. Let's zoom in so we can get this more accurately. Here's Greece again, and here is Israel. We have the patriarchs down here to the time of David, which is what we're gonna fish out. Red bar is our Trojan War. And that is right here, maybe about 1190 BC. I'm going to put another arrow out here. And snap to grid is pushing me around, but I will get it. Here's David. And he was, what, maybe like some people estimate he was 17 years old when David and Goliath story came up. So that might be about 1023 BC. Not too shabby. I mean, this is relatively within the same framework. It's within 170 years. And so let's go to our map, because we're going to zoom in here just a bit, and we're going to talk about the Trojan War and then compare it to David and, well, actually Achilles himself, and the tactics and the weapons and all those sorts of things. So we're going to talk about Achilles because he is the hero of the story of the Iliad. And so let's get our focus onto Greeks in the Aegean Sea. That'd be like this. Now, Achilles and Patroclus, they were very close friends, and then Achilles' cousin was Ajax, who is said to be a mountain of a man. And the only people who could wear the armor of Achilles were Achilles, Patroclus, Ajax, and Hector of Troy. Not a big sample size for all the people in the army. So everyone else in the army was too small, and that's including Agamemnon the king and Ulysses the king of Ithaca. So Agamemnon and Ulysses are midgets compared to Hector, Achilles. The birthplace of Achilles is Mount Parnassus by Delphi, just a tiny bit north of Delphi. It's the mountain to the north of Delphi. And supposedly Achilles learns much on this mountain. Now, after he graduates just a bit, he moves to the island of Skyros, and that is over to his east, in between Turkey and Greece. So now when we go to our map, I put the major players of this war on the map. And I made Ajax and Achilles and Patroclus, Hector, a little bit bigger than everybody else. But you can see where they're coming from. Ithaca is over here, so Odysseus is from Ithaca. And then Menelaus and Agamemnon are from the Peloponnese. Ajax is really close to Athens. And then Patroclus and Achilles are friends here on Skyros. So the problem arises when the Trojans, who are trading allies, come to Sparta, and Menelaus has a wife, Helen. Alexander Paris takes her back to Troy, but Helen is married to Menelaus. Menelaus is the brother of Agamemnon, and Agamemnon is the high king of the southern Greek region. So since he's high king, he can tell all the other kings that they have to get all their people together, get in their naval fleet, attack positions, and go after Helen. So one by one, they are going towards Troy. Achilles has a choice that if he goes to Troy, he'll die, but he'll be immortalized. So that is what happens, of course. That's why he's the hero of the story. And we end up on the coast of Turkey. Troy is the gatekeeper between the Black Sea and the Aegean Sea. So if you hold this position, you're going to be very, very wealthy and have a lot of sway for the people groups that are the sea peoples. And as we zoom in here, we get some idea of how the Greeks set up. Achilles is supposed to be on one side guarding the ships from one side. They don't want their ships to be set on fire because that's their weakness, made out of wood. And so the different kings, there's a lot of kings. I mean, the Iliad, it's just sort of like this person kills that person, this person kills that person, a lot from all the smaller kings. And remember Saul was selected as king because he was head and shoulders higher than anybody else. So I think of Agamemnon and Menelaus as huge people above average, but I also think of Ajax and Achilles as bigger even so. And they would be enticed by gifts so they can be servants of Agamemnon, and then they solidified their empire. So there's a lot of people that speculate on having battering rams and things like that. No, I think these people were the battering rams. I think Ajax and Achilles and Hector, they were the deterrent. They were the battering ram. The whole idea is if your person is bigger than the other person, then you check the other king. So we have King Priam here, and these are the walls of Troy. This is actually the discovered area of Troy. We can look at it two different ways. We can look at this from the Trojan, Turkey type position, where they have the higher ground. That's kind of nice. You can throw your arrows a little farther. And then you have the attacking position along the coast, which have a lot of disadvantages. But nonetheless, they have massive amounts of kings. And this is what this would look like. I would say that there's a column or different columns of army people. But whenever you see Hector getting a hold of the normies, their heads are going to roll. Okay, and whenever Achilles gets a hold of the normies of the Trojans, he is wiping people down 10 at a time. He throws his spear and 10 people die. So that's the kind of thing that's going on here at the Battle of Troy, or the Trojan War. So thinking back to the realism of the pictures we have of Robert Wadlow and the others, that is a 1829 when photography was invented up to present, which it's 2025 currently. And you may be watching this video after that. So that's almost 200 years of getting pictures of tall people. The academics say we can't have giants. But then if we open the window of photography, if we were capable to do that, if we opened it up for 3,000 years, then would we find other giants? I say yes. So that's why I think it is realistic to find people who are as tall as Robert Wadlow. And when I think about the war tactics, it makes perfect sense why things went down the way they went down. Now, when I'm looking and comparing the Trojan War to the Philistine War, there are similar threats, there's similar armor, there's similar weapons, similar victory parade. I mean, even the pottery is influenced by the Mycenaeans into Crete, and the Crete into the Philistines, and then the Philistine pottery even goes into Gaza, and the cities of Ashkelon, the 5 cities of the Philistines. The pottery is found to be very similar to Mycenaean, and so all these things are very amazing to tell us this story. And so one of the things I'm looking at when I was reading through the Iliad, in book 3 we have Paris and Menelaus, and this is this single combat type idea. If thou wilt have me war and do battle, make the other Trojans to sit down, and all the Achaeans, those are the Greeks, but set ye me in the midst, and Menelaus, now that is the husband of Helen, the one who triggers this war, dear to Ares, to do battle for Helen and all her possessions, and whichsoever of us twain shall win, and prove him the better man, let him duly take all the wealth and the women, and bear them to his home. So you can see what they're after. They're motivating their people with the wealth and the women. Okay, this is a common theme. So that's Iliad book 3. And we have this other same type of single combat idea from Helenus, another son of King Priam. And he's trying to convince Hector that it'd be a good idea not to lose the whole group of people, that doing single combat would be good. See, and Helenus, the dear son of Priam, King Priam, understood in spirit that his plan that had found pleasure with the gods in council. And he came and stood by Hector's side and spake to him, saying, Hector, son of Priam, peer of Zeus in council, wouldst thou now in any wise hearken unto me? For I am thy brother. Make the Trojans to sit down, and all the Achaeans, and do thou challenge whoso is best of the Achaeans to do battle with thee man to man in dread combat. And now let's go to the Bible, and we find the story of David and Goliath in 1 Samuel book 17. And he stood and cried unto the armies of Israel, that's Goliath, and said unto them, Why are ye come out to set your battle in array? Am not I a Philistine, and ye servants to Saul? Choose you a man for you, and let him come down to me. If he be able to fight with me and to kill me, then will we be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then shall ye be our servants and serve us. So those words and the way they're defying each other is incredibly similar. And that's the kind of similarities that I found all throughout the Iliad. Let's zoom in here and go in between it. We'll go to the time of the Philistines when the ark is taken. At the death of Eli, we have the ark of Israel captured by the Philistines. We can look at how they're motivating their people. It says in 1 Samuel 4:9, the Philistines are talking to themselves and encouraging themselves because they see the ark has been brought out. Remember, the people are really meticulous about the gods they worship. And the Philistines are worshiping Zeus, but the Israelites are supposedly worshiping Adonai. And so the Philistines get scared, and they say, Be strong and quit yourselves like men, O ye Philistines, that ye be not servants unto the Hebrews, as they have been to you. Quit yourselves like men and fight. So that's 1 Samuel 4:9. So we can see how they're motivating each other. See, they need to have their champions, then they have their army, and whoever has the champions and armies and can hold their group together by threatening others or not being intimidated by others, hold their civilizations together. And then there's this huge servant, master, slave type of a setup where you can see right here in this scripture, we don't want to be servants unto the Hebrews as they have been. See, the Philistines are using them as servants. These are the same exact tactics of the Colchists of Egypt who found the Cretans, who intermarry with the Mycenaeans and are connected to Crete, who are connected to the Philistines. So same exact tactics. So we're going to fast forward to 1023 because that is the best I can do for trying to figure out when the life of David is. Because he was born maybe 1040 plus or minus a year. David might be about 17 when he is going to take food to his brothers. And so this year is probably something like 1023 BC. Now the Philistines gathered together their armies to battle and were gathered together at Shako, which belongeth to Judah, and pitched between Shako and Azekah in Ephes Damim. And Saul and the men of Israel were gathered together and pitched by the valley of Elah, and set the battle in array against the Philistines. And the Philistines stood on a mountain on the one side, and Israel stood on the mountain on the other side. And there was a valley between them. When you get that description, it's always fun to see how close any Hollywood video or any recreation is of this event. Let's see. So we're going to move from our Aegean Trojan War down here to the David and Goliath scenario, because the Philistines are from Crete. They're landing on the beach. They have Gaza, Ashkelon, Ashdod. Ashkelon as their main maritime base. And then they have Ekron and Gath that they have newly created so they can get deeper into the area and steal more people, because they are a man-stealing kind of civilization. We see the overview here. Hebron, remember David was king at Hebron for so many years, 7 or something, or 7.5, and then he was king over all Israel. So this is David's home base and his brothers and Jesse, his father. And you can see this setup, which is extremely strategic. How Gath would be incredible. They were probably going to build another city down here to the south of Gath, somewhere down here. But the blue arrow is David going out to the battlefield to give the picnic lunch to his brothers. And then the red line is where the Philistine, I have a red arrow here, and then more. That is where the Philistines come up into Israel, into this valley. And it is somewhat exciting to me because I have not been to Israel, but looking at it this way, when we have our intelligence, that we can see this incredible area between Azekah and Shoko. And the Bible tells us that Israel had Shoko. So I think Azekah was overrun by the Philistines, and this is an outlying village where the Philistines are taking slaves from. Well, Saul is not too thrilled with this scenario, and so we have the two mountains and the valley in between. I mean, we know exactly where this is. It's not something that is debated. It's mostly thought that Tel Es-Safi is going to be Gath. But we can look at this from the Philistine point of view also, which I find that to be always something that is incredible. Let's go here to the Philistine camp of Gath, and let's look at our situation. Well, if we're looking out there, we see all these mountains, and where should we break through? Well, we look to the south. Mountains up here. Now it may be a little place to go through there, maybe there. Now this is really the place. This is the access place because there is a break in the mountains right here. And so you can walk through here, and then through here, and that's why the Philistines are coming to Azekah to steal people. Because as soon as they overtake that, they can overtake Shoko and anything else. And that would give them even a stronghold in the mountainous region. Israel does really well in the mountainous regions, as Abraham was one who told Lot, do you want to be on the plain or in the mountains? And Lot said, oh man, I want to be by the plain where life is easy. Right over there by Sodom and Gomorrah. Yeah. And we know what happened there. When life is easy, people fill up with pride and then they commit suicide with homosexuality. So here what we do is we see this scenario just like the Bible describes. Isn't it amazing to think of Israel here and Philistines here? They're either going to have a war and a bunch of people are going to die, or two people are going to die, just like the Mycenaeans or the Cretans. So what an amazing scenario. Oh, an interesting piece of information is that a Gittite is someone from Gath. That comes up later in Samuel King's Chronicles. Every once in a while you see the word Gittite. Well, Gath is also thought to be Get or Git, and then you have Gittites. So here is Ephes Damim and the Valley of Elah, and here's where they override together. So those are all definitions for what we see in the Bible. In verse 4, and there went out a champion out of the camp of the Philistines named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. Here is one of the best pictures that I have depicted. It's still not perfect, but it is a good representation, pretty good representation of this scenario. And we can have the video plan also where old Hollywood tried to depict these pretty realistically. I'm surprised at what they have done. They didn't get everything right, but looking at the valley here, looking at the Israel camped up on the hill, Philistines camped up on the hill. Notice the man with the shield, the greaves, that's in front of their the armor on their shin. So it's a little bit close. We can't say it's 100%, but everyone's doing their best and nobody hits the mark, it seems like. Okay, so a cubit, let's define that. It's about 1.5 feet. That's what I like to think of in my head, but sometimes it's just a little bit bigger than that. Like 18 inches, 19, 20 inches. Depends on if you're in Egypt or Hebrew, but I like to just think of it as 1.5 feet, and then the math becomes really easy. So 6 cubits becomes 1.5 feet divided by a cubit equals 9 feet. And a span, so span is half a cubit, so we add 0.75 feet to a span. Goliath is 9 3/4 feet, or 9.75 feet tall. That's 9 foot 9 inches minimum, because some of the cubits are longer than that. So you could think 10 feet. In verse 5, and he had a helmet of brass, talking about Goliath, upon his head, and he was armed with a coat of mail, and the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of brass. And he had greaves of brass upon his legs, and a target of brass between his shoulders. So that's a javelin, a target. And the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and his spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron, and one bearing a shield went before him. Yeah, so not bad. We look at this picture. Okay, here's the weaver's beam, the spear. He has iron, very interesting. The Greeks were iron aged at this point, about 1100 on, and this is 1023. See, there's a lot of historians and academic professors who say there's no way for there to be iron here, and that proves the Bible wrong. But no, the Greeks had iron in 1100, and this is 1023 BC. Notice that it's an iron spear, offensive weapon, for breaking a softer metal, which is bronze or brass. Notice everything pans out exactly how it should be. So this scenario, it has the man with the shield. So he's supposed to run in front of Goliath and make sure he doesn't get his legs cut out from under him. I bet the chainmail came down a lot more, because we're getting the idea that they are covering up everything that is vulnerable for Goliath. So there is only one little spot that's around his face that is vulnerable. And his extra javelin is completely like what the Cretans did. So all these things match up. Here is the Greek spearhead. Now, I bet this is stainless steel, so this is a more modern version of the cast, the ancient cast. So the ancient cast isn't going to be as shiny as this, but it's going to be very similar to that. There's the greaves of brass. The helmet that has a little bit of vulnerability. Now, this is from 800 BC, so notice that they even have the forehead a little bit more armored here, where if you look at depictions of earlier ones, then you go back to 1100, then it might be a little bit more vulnerable right there at the forehead. Maybe because of the David and Goliath story, they made this improvement of the tip of the metal coming down. Oh, going to the greaves, remember in Iliad book 19, the Iliad describes the way Achilles is putting on his armor. This is a text that gives us the comparison between Trojan War and the David and Goliath Philistine-Israel War. The greaves first he set about his legs. So talking about Achilles. Amazing about the greaves. There's the helmet, a coat of brass mail. This is a depiction of it. So the coat of mail is 125 pounds. That's 40 shekels equals a pound. The spearhead is 15 pounds. Now, I throw around a 15-pound axe. There's a 12-pounder and a 15-pounder in the hardware store. Try it sometime. Try splitting wood with a 15-pound axe. Now, take that same 15 pounds and put it on a weaver's beam. And who knows what you would be. 10 feet, 12 feet, 15 feet long. You could kill a person from that far away. Metal is expensive, so they're only going to put their best metal in the most critical position, and they put this on his spearhead, 15-pound head weight. So he's got like 150, 175 pounds of metal all over Goliath. But let's do some more comparisons. Look in the Odyssey. In book 12, it says of Odysseus, I had put on my glorious armor and grasped in my hand 2 long spears. When we're fast forwarding from 1200 BC to 1023 BC, Goliath has a spear and a javelin. That is a spear and a target in 1 Samuel 17, 6 and 7. So the similarities are amazing. Let's look at the insults of each one. Achilles says of Hector, "Dogs and birds shall devour thee utterly," in the Iliad, book 22. When we go to 1 Samuel 17, we see David say, "I will give the carcasses of the Philistine camp to the birds of the sky and the beasts of the earth." The similarities are amazing. Armor is very valuable. So book 17 talks about Hector taking Patroclus's armor, and it is really Achilles' armor. And then there's this big fight to try to get Achilles' armor back. Then Hector, when he was still alive, he says he wants to drag off the corpse of Patroclus and cut his head off and give it to the dogs of Troy in Iliad book 17. And then we can look at the David and Goliath scenario. "Choose you a man for you to let him come down to me. If he be able to fight with me to kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then shall ye be our servants and serve us." Compare this idea of the Iliad to David cutting off the head of Goliath. So the insults are the same, the techniques are the same as we see through Samuel 17, 8 through 11. This insulting went on for a long time, 40 days. That's 1 Samuel 17, 16. No one of Israel would fight Goliath after 40 days. Seems like Saul thinks he's backed into a corner. They just can't keep on getting picnic lunches forever. The people in the cities back home, like Hebron, they want to hear about results. They're giving picnic lunches to the army people so the army will actually do something, not to stand there for 40 days. So it must be that Saul's backed into a corner, and we can read through 37 through 39, where we read here, "And Saul said unto David, Go, and the Lord be with thee. And Saul armed David with his armor and put an helmet of brass upon his head. Also he armed him with a coat of mail." See, now, it looks like this is brass, and so it looks like the Philistines have the advantage because of that iron spearhead. But David says unto Saul, "I cannot go with these, for I have not proved them." And David put them off him. So we just get this incredible description of how the Philistines are outfitted with better offensive material, better metal, but we are going from the Bronze Age to the Iron Age. The Bronze Age is 1200 to 1050 BC, and then early Iron Age is 1050 down to 800 BC. And since we're right here in 1023, this scenario is completely plausible as far as the metals. And we see every little detail all through how Goliath was outfitted and how David was outfitted. Just like we love to hear a good story about the underdog, a stone would be just as dense as a handgun bullet. Anyone who is good with a sling can get accuracy to 200 yards. I mean, that is pretty good. So that's why everybody wanted armor. Not everybody could afford armor way back then because metal was so expensive. But anybody who was noble and could actually have armor, they would not get killed when a volley of stones would come after them. You could only cast that volley of stones when your people aren't at hand-to-hand combat with the other army. So David uses every advantage that he has. And one thing that's not talked about very much is Goliath may have had acromegaly. And that is a tumor on the pituitary gland, and it usually leads to vision problems. With the Greeks having iron, 1100 BC. That makes this very realistic. Philistines are an island sea power that searched for slaves. So everything that is happening here is exactly as the story would be told. They're using duels to maximize slavery. If they can go through this duel, somebody gets a whole city of slaves. So that's something the Mycenaeans were very acute on. What's funny is there is a battle between Paris and Menelaus. Now Menelaus actually wins, and Paris, one of the champion sons of King Priam of Troy, He runs away to Troy. Now, they're supposed to say that they're slaves, but they don't actually become slaves. Isn't that funny? They just keep on fighting. So that was supposed to end the war. Menelaus wins the battle. Paris runs away. So now all Troy are slaves to the Greeks, to the Mycenaeans. But the Trojans say, no, we're going to keep on fighting you. And then you see the same thing happen with Achilles and Hector. Achilles kills Hector. The Trojans don't become Aegeans' slaves there either. And then you go to this scenario where you have David and Goliath. Well, Goliath is saying, we'll be your slaves if you defeat me. Well, David defeats Goliath. Do the Philistines become their slaves? No, they run away to regroup. They run away to Gath. You can see them. They totally disband and run away. See, they have the advantage to run down here in the valley. And the blue arrows are Israel pursuing them as the red arrows. They say, no, no, no. We're going to run back here to Gath, get to our fortification. See, they had no intention of being the slaves. This was just a technique so they could make the Philistines could make the Hebrews their own slaves. They were not going to honor their word. See, the same exact thing happens in the Iliad Odyssey, and that happens here with David and Goliath. The realism of this story is high and archaeologically true. But really, the theological moral of this story is none of the technology of the earth would help David, but God would help David. And you think back to Genesis 3:15. God says to the serpent, I will put enmity between thee and the woman, and between thy seed and her seed. It shall bruise thy head, and thou shalt bruise his heel. Genesis 3:15. Incredible. Theologically, the scale mail, that brass scale mail, makes Goliath look like a serpent. And God had a plan for David, and that was that the line of the Messiah was going to come through David. So Goliath's head was crushed after Goliath hurt the heel of Saul. And that is an amazing theological truth. We cannot come against the plans of God. The serpent was defeated at that time, and we have this illustration to live by. So greater is he that is within you than he that is in the world. It's 1 John 4:4. Walk in the truth. Walk in power. Gain power by repenting of stupid things and forgive others for their stupid things. And go forth in the Holy Spirit and live life to the fullest. I pray that you will have a good week, and I will see you in the next video.